guys, it is an absolutely spectacularly gorgeous spring day here in the collapse of global industrial civilization. It is May Day 2020, and this is Sam Mitchell at Collapse Chronicles. And guys, I could not think of a better way to sign off of Collapse Chronicles than the interview that I am getting ready to have with this man, Bill Gaede, G-A-E-D-E. We're going to go all the way over to Germany, and we're going to talk to Bill Gaede about how humans are going to go extinct in the 21st century. We're going to start with some of his wacky theories about human extinction, and then in the first half, and then we're going to close with actually talking about the corona panic one more time on my way out. But Bill, I don't know how to define this guy. To call Bill Gaede a physicist is to call Sancho Panza, my dog, I don't know, a coyote. Bill Gaede has his fingers in so many pots, guys. But we're going to go over to the doomsday prophecy eschatology side of Bill Gaede's brain for this interview. So, Bill, come on and say hi, and we're going to see where this conversation takes us.
Hi, Sam. Long time no see. I was surprised that you told me that last interview was 3 years ago. I couldn't remember.
Yeah, so anyway, guys, you might as well know it now. That other channel, that guy on that other channel interviewed Bill, I guess it was 2.5 years ago. And Bill, I got a big apology to make. I'm going to make an admission and an apology. This is very rare that Sam Mitchell admits he was wrong and apologizes for it. During that interview, which I thoroughly enjoyed, I thought you were joking, brother. I could not tell if you were joking or if you were just some garden variety whack job. And as far as I was concerned, it was a very entertaining interview, but I didn't pay you any attention. I went on believing with the what I call the Derek Jensen model, that the global industrial economy and global industrial civilization is a threat to this planet. And I still believe the Derek Jensen model. But here's where what you have done for me, brother, is I actually, up until a few weeks ago, was suffering the delusion that bringing down the global industrial economy and, in effect, global industrial civilization was going to be a good thing for our fellow Earthlings. This was going to be the best thing we could do. Well, we did it a few weeks ago, and guess what? You were right, brother. You have proven to me that bringing down the global industrial economy is the single fastest route to, if not human extinction, at least every one of our fellow Earthlings going into the stew pot. So I'm making a public apology to Bill Gaede. Do you accept my apology, Bill?
Yeah, of course. I want you to know something, Sam. I've been beaten up for 20 years now on this issue. I was always a lone man here fighting everybody on the issue of extinction, because no one really believes that man can become extinct. We have intelligence. We have the ability to have foresight. We have intelligence. We can fix any problem, according to a lot of people. And so people have a hard time believing that we're on the Titanic.
Well, you find a few more people now in this rabbit hole believing it. They're just broadening their horizons, I think, of how this can happen. So anyway, guys, I'm going to post that interview from 2.5 years ago with that other fellow from that other channel, because I have nothing to lose at this point. I strongly would advise you to go over there, because we're going to have to fast forward and skip through the first 22 minutes of that hour-long interview. And but we're going to want to pick up, Bill, is what is the common denominator when you look at all of these past mass extinctions, what is the common denominator, the obvious common denominator, tying them together, and how does that look like it's going to play out for our own species and our fellow Earthlings here over the next few years or decades?
Well, in a nutshell, plants disappear periodically. Okay, there were three major, at least the three major ones that we can put our hands on safely, and that's the era of the ferns, the era of the conifers, and the.
Just a nutshell, Bill.
Yeah, but I'll go fast. I promise to go fast.
Nutshell, okay.
And then we have the era of the mammals, which is the flowering plants. And the point here is that all mass extinctions happened right at the point where food disappears, where where what the animals got used to after millions of years, the herbivores, the plants disappeared, the primary production disappeared, and with them disappeared the carnivores. And we have the same situation today. Right now, what's going to disappear are the plants that we eat. And the reason they're going to disappear is that we produce them artificially today. In other words, we produce them simply because of money. And when money goes away, which is my theory, then food goes away, just like with the dinosaurs and the synapsids and the archosaurs and so on. So all these animals disappeared when their food disappeared. We're going to disappear when our food disappears. It disappears because money disappears, and we need money to produce food and distribute.
So the common, as you've written here, and we are the last generation of humans on Earth, the common denominator of all mass extinctions is starvation. By definition, a mass extinction is the disappearance of an entire food chain. And we're going to talk in the second half when we get into the corona panic about all of these farmers plowing under their fields and killing their chickens and dumping their milk and not being able to find anyone to harvest this SARS. We're going to get in that in later on in this as a specific example, but flesh this out for us. So it's the economy. It's not going to be in your worldview. It's going to be a global economic collapse a lot sooner than any environmental collapse that is going to bring down this planet. It is going to be the economic collapse is going to lead into all the other collapses that make us and our fellow Earthlings extinct. We understand each other on this?
Yeah, in general, that's what's going to happen. In other words, you can't have, as I said for 20 years, you can't have more and more unemployment, right? And have fewer people who work maintaining a growing army of people who don't. And that's when, at some point, there's a magical level at which money has no value, because money is essentially being created to pay salaries. That's what it is. And if you can't make it to the end of the month with what they give you, if whatever they give you is only like 95% of what you need to stay to the end of the month, to make it to the end of the month, then at that point, it's not even useful to go to work. Why are you going to go to work to get 95% of what you need? And I think that we're approaching that point. I think this virus simply accelerated the process a little bit and made people think about that possibility. But we're headed in that direction no matter what.
Yeah, we were, as I say, for the first part of this conversation, pretend like we were having this conversation like in ancient history of like 2 months ago, and you and I had never heard of the coronavirus, and we were having this conversation completely unaware of this little black swan, the BS event and looming that we hadn't seen yet. So even assuming this had never shown up, where were we months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, just sitting around waiting for the black swan to fly in?
Even if the black swan did not come in, or the crow, or whatever, even if that didn't happen, we were on our way. And let me tell you why, Sam. Services, which is what we have, for example, the U.S. economy, 80% of it is services. Services is known as unemployment. Services is masked unemployment. Why? Because let's say you have God's eyes, right? You're up there in the heaven, you can see the entire earth, right? What do you see? Well, you see buildings, you see skyscrapers, you see houses, you see streets, highways, you see fields of corn. You know, this is what you see because that's real. Now, do you see transactions like financial transactions? Do you see insurance? No, you don't, because insurance is a promise. And your bank account, that's a promise too. So when you look at services, I think all of it, but maybe I'm missing, maybe some of it qualifies, like maybe hair cutting or landscaping might qualify as something a little more useful. But it's all promises. All of financial world is just promises, and all we have are contracts and promises what we're going to do in the future. You can't see that with God's eyes. What you see with God's eyes, if you had them, is what we constructed, what we made, what we have. We have the cars, we have the boats, we have the airplanes. Those things you see. But you can't see the promises, and that's the problem with services. Services is masked unemployment, and if we're going to put a number to that, if the United States has 80% services, you have 80% unemployment, plus all that unemployment we have from retired people, housewives, students, etc.
And so this was all coming around anyway. I really like how you explained this, and in our last interview, I was talking about your vision. Whether is this going to be a stair step, where we fall down and then recover and fall down, or is it going to be over the cliff? And I think your description was it is going to be, we are going to spiral downward until we get to the cliff. Or is that still your...
Well, no, let me see if I can clarify that. For example, I think that in a couple weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks, within that time frame, probably, they're going to let people go and go to work, and they're just going to put some new rules. And the politicians all over the world, right? They'll say, hey, we're back to the normal. Everybody's happy now. Let's go back to work. And we finally went over the hump, et cetera, et cetera. That's not going to happen. You got 26 million people so far in the United States which are officially unemployed, right? They're receiving government checks. And what's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is suddenly the U.S. government has put into circulation $2.2 trillion. That means that what that does is that devalues the salary of a worker, of the person who does have a job.
I want you to, just please hold off for about 12 or 13 minutes. I've tried. It's very hard to separate these two things.
Yeah.
I want to get the general framework of your theory. Then we're going to look at what is unfolding now. So.
Yeah, well, the general picture.
We're having this conversation, this part of the conversation, on February 1st, not May 1st. So on February 1st, would you have said we are in a downward spiral, waiting to get to the edge of the cliff for the final plunge?
Well, again, yes, I would say we've been at that in that trend for many years. Why? Because we're creating more and more services, which is unemployment, and by doing so, we're not creating employment. We're being blindsided to the fact that we're creating unemployment, and the virus, if anything, just accelerated that process, made it more visible to people.
Okay, so we need to, before before we move into the virus, this whole part, which I really had to go listen to my own interview with you again to really try to understand what you're saying, that the collapse of the food chain, you're not looking at climate change and all of that stuff right now.
Absolutely not.
At farmers, when farmers no longer have an economic incentive to grow our food, they're going to stop growing our food. So if you're depending on a farmer to grow your food in the global industrial economy to find a way to get that food from his field into your mouth, this is what is going to break down. It's the economic collapse. And when it reaches the point of food producers, that's when all hell breaks loose and Mad Max is here. Is that pretty much what you're saying?
Yeah, and keep in mind one thing also in what you just said. Only 1% of the U.S. workers and 1% of GDP is agriculture. And that's what keeps us all alive. So we got a very few people and very few income maintaining 1% maintaining the 100%, in other words.
Yeah, and so it's down. So again, if we were having this conversation on February 1st instead of May 1st, and then we'll bring it up, on February 1st, what were the triggers you were looking at that could make money, quote, disappear to the extent that farmers just said to hell with it. There's nothing in it for me. I might have a garden for me and my family, but the rest of you, what were those triggers?
Well, keep in mind one thing here. I was looking at another indicator, and not the food itself. What I was looking at was the global growth rate. In other words, what is the global economic growth rate for everybody? We're talking about China, Europe, everybody, you know. And what I was seeing is that number was getting smaller and smaller over. You know, if you look at it over 50 years, that number became smaller and smaller and smaller. And this means that at some point we would have hit a plateau. We would have approached the asymptote. Yeah, as far as growth is concerned, at some point we would have reached zero growth, zero economic growth worldwide, and that would have triggered, you know, a deflation spiral. Okay, and that's more or less what I had in mind. What the virus did, if anything, is by coming in, is accelerate the process that was, I think, going on anyways. And again, that is that more and more people were coming out of agriculture and manufacturing and going into services. So you had more and more what I call unemployment. I call services unemployment. And superposed on top of that, we had no global economic growth.
Yeah, okay, so, all right, just to sum up this part of the conversation, then we're going to start analyzing the corona panic. So just to sum up for the folks, a global economic collapse from whatever the trigger was going to be that we've just been sitting around waiting for is going to eventually make the idea of money a joke. And when the ultimate concern is when the food producing part of the economy, which is a pretty slender thread, as you're saying, it goes, that is when starvation gets, and people are going to, you know, when they get hungry, they're going to start looking for something to eat. And so before we get into this, I want to touch on one more thing, and my previous video, how when we stopped talking about humans and started looking at our fellow Earthlings, well, when consumer have money for whatever reason to buy food, obviously, who are they going to start looking to? If they can't look to people, other people, to give them money, they're going to start looking, for the zebra in the unprotected national park down the street, or they're going to start looking at that fat little Pekingese next door. And we're literally, once this hits, we are going to literally eat every one of our fellow Earthlings. If we can't buy our food, we're going to go out and get it the way we did the first 200,000 years. But we're going to have a million of us doing that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that's the idea. The idea is that, you can imagine this happened to the T-Rexes as well. When they couldn't find any food, then they started eating each other. And we're going to end up pretty much in the same boat. First we kill whatever's out there alive, and the next step will be killing each other, killing your neighbor, the one who gave you a cup of sugar yesterday. Now you're going to have to kill him.
Well, yeah. I mean, playing this out. If it was, if there were 100 million people on the planet or whatever, is one thing, but 8 billion people. I mean, clearly, is any gazelle in Uganda getting sleeping with both eyes closed tonight? It's going to be a feeding frenzy on this planet. As you say, who are we going to eat after we've eaten every gazelle and every zebra and every gorilla in Africa? Who the hell do you think we're going to eat?
Let me say something that that came to mind, because a lot of people say, well, there are lost tribes out there that don't belong to the global economy. They do hunter-gathering still. And, I was in the Amazon River, in the Amazon jungle there, a little town called Leticia in Colombia. Three cities meet there. Anyways, you go there and you find these Indians, and they live quite prehistorically. When you visit their villages, etc., you go with a tour guide. And it turns out that, these people are really are not that, far back in time. They have antennas coming out of their huts. That's one issue. The other issue is that, they go to the city. They do have contact with the white man, so to speak. And it turns out that, even you take any tribe that is really, really backward, what we're going to be doing is killing whatever they killed. If they ate boars, we're going to kill those boars, and then we're going to kill them. So those lost tribes are not going to be off the hook because they're not part of our economy.
Yeah, they'll be the first humans we eat.
Yeah, exactly.
This isn't, guys, I know people listening to the two of us talk, thinking we're a couple of loudmouth jackasses, and that we're basically crazy, that this is never going to happen. But what I've seen in the last few weeks, okay, we're going to use this as our segue. Okay, we're going to now move our conversation from February 1st to May 1st. So I might as well go out with a bang here instead of a whimper at Collapse Chronicles. So I was listening to your video from March 15th last night. The video you made on March 15th, trying to figure out what the coronavirus was going to mean for this planet, and you stated with an absolute certainty that the panic surrounding the virus itself, you take the physical threat to humanity, how many people this is going to kill, this virus is going to kill. You compare that to the economic fallout from this panic.
Of course.
Over that, there is no comparison.
Of course.
If this is exactly what has gotten me in so much trouble, so where are you? So that was 6 weeks ago. Do you still agree that the panic is what is going to bring us into the collapse of civilization and quite possibly the extinction of our species?
Well, the panic part only accelerates. That's only an accelerant. The reality is that whether it goes slow or fast, the outcome is inevitable. We will have money disappear. Money will have no value at some point, and when that happens, not if, but when it happens, no one has any incentive to produce food or to distribute it to the cities. That's going to be the problem. Now, as far as the virus, yeah, I think in retrospect, maybe what we should have done, maybe, I don't know, don't quote me on this one, I'm just giving you a maybe here. Maybe what we should have done is let the virus kill whoever it kills, and don't mess with the economy. By messing with the economy, I think we did it worse. We added insult to injury there, and I think we made we put at risk 8 billion people for a few thousands that might die, even a million. I'll even concede a few million. But it probably would have been better for a few million to die and not to put the economy at risk where 8 billion are now at risk.
Amen, brother. I'm just going to let you dig this hole for both of us. This breath of fresh air floating out of Bill Gaede probably doesn't begin to compliment it for the breath of fresh air floating out of his mouth. But thank you. It is all I can say from the few of us out here who agree with you. So you think clearly the cure is
the disease, yeah. The disease, yeah.
No question.
Well, look at something, Sam. You had the 1918 flu, Spanish flu. It killed millions. They say it killed millions. Okay, that's the history record. Let's assume that's true. If it killed millions, here we are. We're all still here, right? That means that, yeah, it killed a big percentage of humanity, probably more than this virus did. And the world kept, rolling forward. But with this virus, we're in a surrealistic situation where everybody's at home wearing masks when they go out into the streets, and a lot of people are not even working. And so I don't know. I don't know if the cure was worse than the disease in this case.
Okay, and I have always been using sub-Saharan Africa as my poster child for the collapse of a planet. Since day one, I have been telling people, if you want to see the future of this planet, go over to sub-Saharan Africa. When you're sitting here in what I call Honkyville, over here in the U.S. or Europe or Australia, and in one of these, quote, first world economies, your theory that you're positing sounds a little bit more absurd. I think it would have a lot more relevance. It would play a lot better in sub-Saharan Africa. So what I'm seeing in sub-Saharan Africa right now, brother, are you seeing the same thing? That we have had now 70% of Africa is under the age of 30, which is a terrifying enough statistic without the coronavirus. So here we have 70% of that population under the age of 30, and anyone who studied the death rates of coronavirus knows how many people under 30 are even going to get sick of this. So we have now locked down, pull a number out of your hat, 300 million sub-Saharan Africans are being forced to stay in their homes to protect them from getting a virus that has a 99.99% survival rate for people under the age of 50. They are not allowed to go out and work to make money to buy food. Their money has been killed, as you say. Yeah. It has been removed. They do not have a way to make money. Do the math. Are you seeing that this ridiculous. So now, instead of those people, in order to protect them from this virus, hundreds of millions of people on this planet who would never have gotten it or would have shrugged it right off are now looking at starvation.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, you're going to have that situation in many countries, not only in Africa, but probably in Southeast Asia and South America. A lot of people can't afford not to go to work. Even if you sell drugs on the streets, you're making a living somehow, and that guy's off the streets now. He's going to have problems as well. So everybody, I mean, in Colombia, you have these prostitutes. They all, there's like 2,000 of them in some kind of union, and they're upset because they say, look, you're forcing me to stay at home. How am I supposed to make a living if I don't do my stuff? And so there's a lot of jobs out there that people have, again, a lot of service jobs, trade, etc., that were unemployment, but we didn't recognize them as such until now, because we say, oh, look, this prostitute, she's not doing her stuff anymore, and this drug seller, he's not doing his stuff anymore, and all these people were living off of whatever they were living off, and now they can't, because now there's no people on the streets, first of all, and second, they got to stay at home as well.
Now, I am going to debate you on the prostitution part, because I have a very good friend. Her business is called Happy Ending Massage. She's telling me her business is booming. Because of all of these stressed out guys, including doctors here, and including physicians here in Austin, Texas, she is assuring me, because so few people in her line of work are still, they're so terrified. Her business is absolutely booming.
Yeah, I'm talking about prostitutes that are on the streets. It's a little different out there in Bogota and in Buenos Aires, for example.
Yeah, not a whole lot of people driving, not a lot of jogs driving down the street. But I mean, to get a little more serious here, do you think, it seems to me at this point, what are we, let's call it 2 months into this madness, it seems to me, Bill, that a lot more people are, in fact, by orders of magnitude, I think a lot more people are going to starve to death, particularly people under the age of 50. By orders of magnitude, you're going to see more people starve to death on this planet in the next year than would ever have died from the coronavirus. Do you agree with me, or am I just getting carried away?
Well, the question is whether that's going to happen in the advanced nations, because you can't talk about people starving to death in Europe, in the United States. It just doesn't. You can't even imagine that. But I was talking to Germans here, and a long time ago, about 10 years ago, and I was asking them, look, do you think we'll ever have those soup kitchens again here in Germany, where people came with a little plate and they gave them a spoonful of soup, and they all laughed. They said, no, it'll never happen. That's gone. That's history. And I think we're going to see that again somewhere in the States, and maybe in Japan, Europe. You're going to see this.
Okay, but getting back to the quote developing world, let's go over there before we come back over to Honkyville.
Okay.
Do you agree with me that more people are going to starve than would have died in the virus if we'd let it burn, baby burn?
Well, yeah, I think, for example, I can give you an example of Argentina. I'm an Argentine as well. And I'm German and Argentine. And down there, they're having problems with labor right now, very big problems. One of the issues is that the unions have decided to cut their own pay. And that's on top of the fact that the government also flooded the market with money, with pesos. And so we have that situation I was telling you, the devaluation of the coin. And that's one issue. But then what happens to all those people who were, peripheral? They were not really into the economy full time. They were like just hanging in there. Well, yeah, those people I think are going to have problems surviving. And there's going to be one of two possibilities. Either they starve to death or they're going to go out there with a gun and do some justice.
It's well, so yes, certainly when you track this, at least the environmentalists who are being honest about this, and it's unbelievable how people don't want to hear this. That it just tracks where the most biodiverse, gardens of Eden left on this planet are in the very in the very places where people are most likely going to be facing starvation, which gets us into our fellow Earthlings heading into the stew pot. And I see, at least for sub-Saharan Africa, the next great megafaunal, any mammal over the size of a gerbil, and probably the gerbils too.
Yeah. They say that happened in the days of the dinosaurs, that anything bigger than a cat did not survive.
Yeah. I think humans weren't we about the size of a shrew. That's how we literally squeak through. It is because we were about the size of a postage stamp, and we could dive under a rock or whatever during those tumultuous years. But anyway, let's move it over to, because obviously I don't think I have many listeners to this interview in sub-Saharan Africa. I actually have a couple of subscribers from believe it or not, that I actually do have some subscribers from sub-Saharan Africa, although I've probably lost them. Let's look at let's look at the first world, the people who are listening to this and are still sitting there smugly believing that we're doing this right, that we need to do everything we can to keep one more human, that limiting the number of human deaths by this virus, we need to make that our number one priority, and above all else, keep these lockdowns, whatever it takes to keep the number of human deaths down. What do you say to that gang of people vehemently defending these economic lockdowns to tamp down the number of actual humans dying from this virus? What's your message to that crowd?
Well, again, I think it was a bad decision to lock people down. In other words, to mess around with the economy to stop this virus. I think that's, I wouldn't have done it. I would have preferred that more millions of people die, if necessary, millions, but don't mess with the economy. That's one issue. The other issue is, my theory says that no matter what we do, we cannot stop extinction. Okay, so there's nothing we can do to overcome the extinction. We cannot surpass it. We're going to die, no doubt about it, in my mind. And so when people mention, the Illuminati or the Jews or the rich people, the Chinese are going to take over, when they say all this stuff, at least that has nothing to do with my theory. I want to clarify that. This is going to happen no matter what. There's nothing we can do about this. Now, as far as the virus, well, that's something we could have done differently. We could have let people die. Let's say 10 million people died. Okay, so 10 million, it's unfortunate. 10 million people would have died. But at least we didn't mess with the economy. And the economy is the bigger danger, because now you're affecting the lives of 8 billion people. And like you said, a lot of people are not even going to get infected. A lot of people who do get infected, they might survive, maybe 2/3 at least. And so, the chances of dying are really small, relatively small. Does it overwhelm the medical facilities? Yes. But like in Ecuador, they're just burning the bodies in the streets and dumping them in a mass grave. So, if you can't save the guy, what are you going to do? Yeah.
I mean, of course, I'm just being accused of being this absolute cold-hearted monster. But I'm looking at this from an ecologist point of view. That we're clearly there's too many people on this planet that this is not going to trim that. It's not going to affect any of the human population. That every day we add more people to this planet that have died in the last 2 months. But anyway, let's talk about unemployment. We are at, I think I'm hearing today with the newest figures, 30 million American. Now, I know you don't live in the U.S., but you're probably familiar enough, and you can probably extrapolate to Germany. 30 million Americans have been put out of work, their lives ruined, because 60,000 people have died. 30 million Americans out of work today.
Yeah, and I think that's the numbers speak for themselves.
So what does it mean? I mean, this is clearly your unemployment economy has taken a major leap forward. Is it going to be 50 million Americans next month, or are we going to get out of this one and figure out a way to get people back to work, or has the cliff? Have we gone over the cliff?
Well, I think we've gone over the cliff. It's not very easy to put 30 million people to work, and the only way you can put them into jobs is not going to be in manufacturing or agriculture. It's going to be into services, which again is putting them into unemployment in a certain way, except that they get paid by private companies instead of by the government. But when you have 30 million, that's a big number. That's around 15% of the U.S. Worker labor force, right? And so that's a big number. And you can't put those people to work in a jiffy. And again, like I said earlier, the politicians are going to act as cheerleaders after this thing is over and people go back to work, so to speak. Partly because they have an election this year, so that's going to be, they need to be cheerleaders. They say, look, we beat it now, please vote for me again, and we're going to go back to work. But see, the cheerleading is not going to put people to work. Okay, in order to get people to work, you're going to have to ramp up. You're going to crank up again the hotels, the airlines, and so many other things that have died now. And I'm not sure you're going to be able to do that just by cheerleading. You're going to have to do something else. You're going to have to do investment. And I'm not sure you're going to be able to recover those 30 million very quickly, first of all, and second, maybe ever.
Well, you can't argue with that. So let's talk about now, where is, it's like every time I turn around, the U.S. government is throwing another $1 trillion, $2 trillion at the problem. They just keep throwing more and more money at the problem. I mean, telling all these people, we're just going to send you all of this money. How does this play into? Where the hell are all of these trillions of dollars coming from? I thought this entire economy was $20 trillion. Where are we? Over $3 trillion. That's 312, 3 out of 20 is whatever that percentage is. Where the hell is this money coming from, Bill?
Well, it's coming from God. In God we trust, right? But this is the issue, Sam. The issue is the following, and you can see it here very clearly. Why doesn't the U.S. government, for example, right, give every person $1 million? I mean that would solve all our problems. I'm sure it would solve all your problems, right?
Real quick, brother.
I mean, the fact that the government just creates money out of the magic wand shows you that money is worthless that they're creating, because all they're doing by doing so is devaluating the average worker's salary. The salary of that worker suddenly went down. He got a demotion. You know, and so you can't continue doing, you can't continue giving $2 trillion to people to cover the hole. You know, you can't do that, because the more money you put into circulation, the less a worker makes, and that means that more and more workers will not be able to make it to the end of the month, especially if they have, you know, minimum wage. And then, of course, some of the politicians propose raising the minimum wage, but by doing so, what are they doing? They're also devaluating the money.
Well, but people are still screaming. And I'm talking about on the what used to be called the left in this country, leading the charge, but on both sides of the political fence, we're still hearing calls for more and more, just throw more money at it. Just keep throwing money. And I'm thinking, man, I want to be working at that, where all of this money dumping is. But what is this doing to our national debt? Where is this? Where is it going to end? Where is the debt to GDP ratio going to be a year from now? And of course, we're getting a hell of a, what nobody's talking about is the tax revenues. The tax revenue, as all of this. You know, at the same time they're printing all this money, the money coming in is not coming in anymore.
Yeah, first of all, they're not collecting taxes. They're postponing the taxes. That means the government's going to be suffering from that point of view. Then they're creating money on the other side. Then they're raising the minimum wage. So they're taking all these decisions because it's these are short-term you know, solutions. In other words, they're plugging the boat that's got holes. They're plugging them with bubble gum. That's what they're doing. And you can't just continue plugging holes with bubble gum. The boat is going to sink at some point. You can't, you know. And so this is where the problem is. The problem is that you can't just throw money at the problem and say, oh, we're going to solve this problem at least momentarily, and that's just throwing money at the problem. And you can't do that, because all you're doing is devaluating the workers' salaries. That's all you're doing.
And so this problem is only going to get worse and worse.
Well, it's going to get worse because of this, Sam. There's another issue. When you have less disposable income, you don't buy Chinese products. And that means the Chinese don't sell. They have to kick people out of their companies, right? And so it affects the global economy as well, because people don't have disposable income to spend on stuff. They won't buy more cars. They won't buy houses, you know, especially big pricey items, right? And so, you know, a lot of industries are going to go under. They're going to have to kick people out into the streets. That's going to increase the unemployment rate, the official unemployment rate. And so, you know, the whole thing is intertwined. When you move a domino here, the one on the other end also falls.
And obviously, the main domino we're looking at, and we're already seeing, you know, these. We're on one hand, we're seeing right here in this country the pictures from San Antonio, Texas, 2 weeks ago. That line of cars going to the food bank. The pressure on food banks is exploding. At the same time that they're not getting any food, because, as you say, we're already seeing farmers plowing under food is being left unharvested. They're plowing, and they're literally right now, as we're speaking, they're plowing under food. And those are 2 million chickens. Just one poultry company in the U.S. last week just killed two. They used the word depopulate. We depopulated by 2 million chickens. Everywhere you go.
No, but you got something else, Sam, and that's the issue that you wonder, because ask yourself the following: why? When the coronavirus hit and everybody was said to, you know, was asked to stay at home or forced to stay at home, why did the food suddenly deplete from the supermarkets? Why did all the toilet paper disappear? Well, because people stocked up. massively. And the question is, why did they stock up? Well, because everybody, more or less who's rational says, hey, these are bad times. Just in case, I'm going to stock up. And so everybody went to the food market, started buying everything they could find. And now, this was not replaced fast enough. And so now you don't have any capitalism. What you have is communism. You have ration. For example, here in Germany, you're not allowed to buy more than 2 packets of flour, of rice, of whatever, of spaghetti or whatever, because, it's only two packages per person. And so you go from this capitalist system where you would say, hey, this should be some entrepreneur should take advantage of this and produce, more food. That's not what's happening. Instead, they went to communism. They said, let's ration all this. Let's give only 2 packages per person. And that also is that's gonna limit sales as well. There's gonna have an impact on sales.
We're going to be seeing more of that. Okay, here in our last few minutes of this interview. So, okay, by some miracle, some hocus pocus species of new bubble gum and scotch tape we come up with in the next few weeks or months, we actually, and I know I'm suspending disbelief, is that the word for what I'm doing here, we actually get through this one. And things get, at least on the surface, patched back up. Everyone is going back to the beach and to the movies and whatnot. Brother, you and I both know that if the corona panic doesn't get us, if something on this level of threat has thrown this planet into such disarray, when the big kahuna gets here, as you were talking about, that this is a dress rehearsal for what's coming down the pike. Just because if we do survive this, it should be. What does that mean? Is it the best we can call this is a dress rehearsal for the one that really does take us over the cliff?
Yeah, what this is going to do is grind us maybe gradually, hopefully gradually. Hopefully it takes years and not weeks, taking us to the precipice, to the abysm, and at some point there's going to be a point of no return. And so, yeah, we're going to be playing around with the economy for probably the next few months. But getting 26 million people or 30 million people now back to work, one issue. The other issue is the devaluation of the coinage. In other words, money is not going to be worth as much. And then there's going to be the issue of purchasing. All these countries, all of them, rely on sales abroad, in other words, on international commerce. And so the United States is not going to buy as much from China. China is not going to buy as much from the U.S., et cetera, et cetera. That's going to cause an impact on local industries in each country. So all of this is so intertwined that, I don't even think we have a computer to figure it out.
Yeah. When we really do get to the edge of this cliff, when we do go over and this whole thing comes down, how long is that going to take before we are really screwed as a species and just as an order of mammals on this planet? Is this going to take 2 weeks, or is your cliff from the top of the cliff to the bottom, is it 2 weeks, 2 years, or 20 years?
No. That's going to be weeks, no doubt about that. And let me tell you why. Once we reach the edge of the cliff, it means that at that point, money is no more. That means suddenly people realize that they can't use money to buy anything, especially what they need, which is food. Yeah. And so at that point, whatever you got in your fridge, that's a measure of how much time you have to live.
Yeah.
So once we hit the edge of the cliff, that's it. That's going to be weeks. It can't be any other way.
Listen to this man. I did, to my own peril, I did not listen to this man. 2.5 years ago, I shrugged him off as just kind of a character biologist, you, brother, and 200 people I have interviewed, you called the corona panic better than anybody else out there. And I'm not going to make the mistake of not listening to Bill Gates anymore. But Bill Gates, the civilization is getting ready to collapse on this camera, so the final time until Collapse Chronicles comes back on the air, which might not be ever, this could be the last time I ever ask this question. Bill Gates, if you were not talking to Sam Mitchell at Collapse Chronicles where you could run your crazy mouth for an hour, but you actually had the mainstream media stick a microphone in front of your face and say, Bill Gates, give us the 60-second message to the planet on May 1st, 2020, what would your 60-second soundbite sound like?
Well, we don't have too long to go. I saw a little banner today from a strike or people who were out on the street and said, our future is in our hands. And I say, no way, the future is not in our hands. The future was already predicted a few years ago, and that's that, our economy cannot grow forever. When the economy comes to a stop, money is no more, and when money is no more, food is no more, and when food is no more, humans are no more.
There you go. When food is no more, humans are no more, like every other extinction before us. But Bill Gaede, we have got to, right, as much as it breaks my heart, we have got to wrap this up. So guys, you can find, Bill's got a whole bunch of different websites. He's got his own YouTube channel. He's all over the place. And so get over there and find more from this man. But right now, stick around there for a minute, Bill, after we hang up. But guys,
okay.
What can I say? It has been fun. 2 years I did this. And I don't know when I will be back. But if you enjoyed my final Collapse Chronicles interview for the foreseeable future, please give Bill some love and give him a thumbs up. And if you did not enjoy this conversation, give Bill and Sam Mitchell a big resounding thumbs down that you don't want to hear this. And anyway, that is your choice. But guys, thanks for listening. And Bill Gaede, we really appreciate you coming here for an hour. And more importantly, we appreciate the hard, lonely struggle to try to speak truth to power. That's to your great own personal disadvantage. And Bill Gaede, keep up the good fight. Did you say bye or something?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And I hope to see you again in Chronicles.
Okay, we'll stick around for just a minute. Well, anyway, guys, I don't know. This might be the last time you ever hear me say this. Bye, guys.